Games and psychopathy. Violent video games and psychopathy. I don't honestly think that you could entirely blame mass shootings upon games. However, that's in and of itself alone. Yeah, it's definitely not connected. But when you compound stress, anxiety, not being able to espouse one's inner self, always feeling neglected in that, so that steam gets pent up, and then when you play games, the only way that you can relieve yourself is by violently ripping other people to shreds. It certainly helps for you to desensitize yourself to murder. Now, I don't try to put it out there like, yeah, it's connected. People who go on mass shootings play video games. No, I'm not at all. Like, maybe. I don't honestly know, but I doubt that's the only thing. You can't just look at one thing in your life and say, this is the reason why everything sucks. It's more than that. Now, some people are going to find this unconnected, but I find it relevant to the situation. So I'm going to bring it up. My grandfather, during Vietnam, his main goal, aside from getting heroin into the country, was to cause a form of hate and fear of the enemy, the Vietnamese. Now, of course, there was all kinds of other things going on, but all he really had to do was give false intel. That's where it started. False intel. Getting people purposely killed, so that the most bloody conflicts came into fruition because of terrible intel. Because of that, our troops would then fear the enemy, thinking they're everywhere. When in all actuality, it's just you ended up in the worst possible positions. By your own fucking leadership. By their design. Not the enemy, their design. And then, of course, compounded with the fact that you're dealing with an enemy that is non-European. World War II, you can see that there is a lot less murder and death and destruction from the Allied forces, at least mainly from the Americans, but in general, the Americans and the English against the Germans and whatnot. It was mostly from the Soviets. Soviets did a lot of fucking death and destruction. But, of course, they kind of came into fruition by the Jewish Bolsheviks. So, there could be a little bit more explanation in that route of things. But back to the point here. Vietnam was a time frame where the West wasn't fighting itself. It was fighting a smaller, quote-unquote, weaker power in a completely culturally different land, where the language was so different, it was nigh impassable if you were caught in their camps. So, with that being said, most people would grow up hating and fearing the Vietnamese because of it. Those people who would go crazy, end up blowing away entire villages, just enjoying themselves in the process. There you go. Stress compounded with anxiety, and when it comes to the military, you're not allowed to express yourself. I'm fairly sure it was very similar back then as it is now when I served. So, when you cannot relieve that stress, and you can't really guzzle it away overseas, like drinking becomes restricted, and you can't go whoring around because you have to be worried about some Vietnamese hooker slicing your throat open. Yeah, after a while you just become a paranoid asshole. And that's not to say that our guys just all turned out to be paranoid schizophrenics or, fucking sociopaths. It doesn't mean that at all. It means to those that were going down that route, we gave them plenty of reasons to believe that paranoia. Now, we're in a time frame that is technologically surpassed that previous timeline, with bright lights, television screens in our hand, playing all kinds of games where slaughter is pretty much the main subject, trying to kill as many as possible. One of my favorite games growing up, the game series, was Total War, where I got to conquer the world, mostly the Western world, as either the Roman Empire, the Macedonian Empire, whatever. But, albeit I could conquer without taking as much territory or even taking as much lives as necessary, but it was more fun for the battles. They took the concept of murder, death, and destruction and made it fun. They made it a game, just as much to us as it is to them in higher echelons of power. You see where I'm trying to go with here? They're not going to get rid of games like that. It helps them. It still feeds them. It still puts money on the table and troops on the ground. So it does its job. The real, I guess in my opinion, the real question here that they're trying to make is, can you ignore the you'll have to forgive me on that word, desensitizing of death and destruction coming from our entertainment, which literally means enter your mind? Can we really ignore that? That it plays a role? No, we can't. But we shouldn't also make it illegal simply because we think that that's the reason why. Because now you're just taking away yet another place for people to relieve that steam. You're taking that away. And that's the real issue here. Do you want to ignore the evil, or do you want to compound it? Those are the two options you're getting right now. So please think on these things before you start to point fingers and say, it's because of games like this, it's because of movies like that, it's because of rappers like him, it's because of blah, 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 blah. It's all of it. It's all of it combined and mashed into one fucked up cube. And you're in the center of it with me. So, thankfully I had someone that built the fucking cube tell me a little bit of the cheat codes, so I can peek my head out and realize it's all fucked. No point in playing, or else you're just going to become exactly what you fear. You'll be consumed by that which you allow to consume you, because you will consume it like a glutton. My consumption was wrath. 7 sins. As much as I get that there's a lot of people who cannot tolerate Christianity or certain ideologies that came into Christianity later on. I mean, yeah, sure, God talked about all these different sins and whatnot, but ultimately it mostly came from pagan understanding that there are 7 basic things you want to stay away from. And that's the number 1 on there is pride. And yet people are lost to patriotism all the fucking time. Gay pride. You're literally lost to the pride of your lust. Like, you're literally mixing 2 sins into one. Oh, I get it. It means I can finally be who I am. You're not your sexual organ. You're not your sexual orientation. You're not what you do in your spare time. If you are, then that means everyone who plays shooting games is a shooter. That means everyone in the military is a drunk. Even if they just think about drinking while they're at fucking work, they're a drunk. And they should be proud about being a drunk. Do you see how stupid that is? And people are going to get upset by what I just said. Suck it up. It's part about being an adult. I got tired of people calling me a white supremacist. But I had to grow up to that all my life. Teachers ignoring bullies. Because the bully, all he had to do is, well, he said something racist. No, I didn't. But of course, since I look like this, and yeah, it's believable. He probably did. He's probably got racist family members. He probably learned it from them. Yeah. Wake up, America. Get your head out your ass. Realize that everything plays a role. Doesn't mean that we should get rid of it entirely. It doesn't mean that we should compound things any further. And certainly not ignore it. Especially if it's a piece of the problem. One stone in a pyramid is still a part of the pyramid. So don't forget it. God bless. Good luck.